Miss Millicent Kennedy. So we're going to go ahead and start the recording. So like I said, welcome all. We have a really wonderful workshop with Millicent tonight. I'm going to go ahead and introduce them. So Millicent goes by they, them pronouns. Feel free to rename yourself or put your pronouns in the chat. Millicent Kennedy, as art practice, collaborates with materials and time through performance, fiber, and print. The themes explored in their work often pivot on the tension between labor and impermanence. Kennedy serves as a curator of exhibitions at the Fine Arts Center Gallery in Northeastern Illinois University, and has previously served as the gallery director at Roxford University. They currently teach classes and workshops in and around Chicago, where their studio is located. They received a bachelor's degree from Northeastern Illinois University and an MFA from Northern Illinois University, where they were awarded the Helen Merritt Fellowship. They received solo exhibitions from Belong Gallery, SXU Art Gallery, Roman, Susan, and Parlor and Ramp, and as well as a site-specific installations with Charles Alice Art Museum, Terrain Exhibitions Biennial, and Purple Window Gallery. They have received artist residencies with Roman, Susan, Terrain Exhibitions, and Little Street Art Center. See their UV for more information regarding exhibitions and press. So to tell you a little bit about Dispatch Gallery, thank you for joining our second workshop series hosted by Dispatch Gallery. These workshop series are meant to be a free and accessible resource for all community members to learn and to share with artists. Dispatch Gallery is a self-funded artist-run gallery to uplift and showcase artists of color, LGBTQ, AI plus artists, immigrant artists, and marginalized communities not usually represented by the traditional brick and mortar artist spaces. So please welcome Millicent Kennedy. I will hand it off to you. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much for the intro and for having me. I'm really excited to be talking with all of you today. So yeah, I'm Millicent. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Elliot and Giselle, will you let me know if it looks weird at all? I think that we've got it taken care of. Thank you. Okay. All right. So thank you for hosting me today. I'm so excited to talk to you about a topic that I know a lot of artists can be really stressed about. It can be very daunting, discussing your artwork. But you know, it's very important and we're going to get into it. Okay. So I'll just give you a little introduction. Again, my name is Millicent Kennedy. I use they, them pronouns. And I'm an artist, curator, and educator. And also I've included a short description of the general themes that are seen in my art that I collaborate with materials and time through performance, textiles, and print. And I really intentionally wanted to include kind of more than one way to introduce yourself. I think it's really important that you have control over the horse that you ride in on, and with artists, it's vast. You contain multitudes and have a lot of varied perspective that you can introduce yourself as. So don't be afraid to be as casual, as formal as feels right for the situation. This is a step that should build connection and make your audience comfortable, be it in your professionalism or your relatability. So, why you should talk about your art. I think that before we get into this topic, and I truly really enjoy sharing about my art practice, maybe to a fault. I really do enjoy that. I know that it's something that is difficult for a lot of people, so I think it's we should establish why it's important. You're interesting and you deserve to take up space. Additionally, reflecting from discussing your work can help you grow as an artist, and connecting with others is why we're here. So connecting is something that's worth doing, and artists, like all people, need community. And I think that talking about your practice is a great way to do that. So just a little outline about how we'll kind of organize our conversation today. I am going to start with predominantly presenting, and we'll have a Q&A afterwards. And the way that I kind of have this organized is that I have open-ended questions for you to consider what would work for you in talking about your practice. So I'd encourage you to, if you don't already have a notebook where you can jot some things down, just some thoughts as we kind of go along. And in addition to talking about these open-ended questions, I'll tell you kind of like what works for me. So the questions that we're talking about today are supposed to help you in a variety of situations, be it casual networking, talking to people at galleries, studio visits and interviews where it's a little more formal, but still has an air of casualness, and artist talks and presentations. And, the questions that we're going to look at today, some of them might work for you and some might not. It's kind of something that's your option to take or leave as you see fit. Much like an art practice, there's experimentation. Some things will work and some things won't. But before we get started, I'd just like to remind you that you're the top authority on your work and your practice. So for today, I would like us to do our best to foster confidence. There's no need to gaslight yourself or feel that you aren't an authority. You know your artwork, you know your influences, you know what you're drawn to. It's good to be open to the conversation, but I think that you can at least temporarily take "I don't know" and diminutive language out of your vocabulary. Okay, so our first question. What about your practice invigorates you? What topics get you excited when they come up? This is how you should lead the conversation about your work. Louise Bourgeois said, "Tell your story and you will be interesting." I fully believe this. The love and enthusiasm that you have for your work and your practice will foster enthusiasm and connection with others. This also helps you clarify how you want to be discussed, at least while you're in the room. Someone might call me a quilter and a bookmaker, but I would say that I'm interested in mediums that are accessible and undervalued as ways of discussing labor and the working class and the dynamics of fine art and craft. Question 2, how do you want to connect? Consider that your practice is likely about a lot of things. What do you want to prioritize discussing? Consider the focus of your practice now. This question might be the most open and different from situation to situation. Connecting about a show that you have coming up is a really different conversation than the themes that a trusted colleague is seeing in a new body of work. I think that trusting yourself with guiding a conversation is something that develops with time and practice. I've watched my peers get better at it in grad school as we got used to having studio visits and committee meetings. And I think that it makes sense to keep track of questions that you are asking yourself about the work. What are some things that come up for you in the studio? How would you organize those with a close inner circle? Are there things that you want to bring to a broader audience? Maybe it's something that you just personally reflect on. It can be pretty open. Who is your audience? And how can you engage with them? Advice: avoid generic platitudes. One of the most interesting things that I noticed when I was working at the Roger Brown Study Collection was that the curator, Lisa Stone, had a different presentation for every group that came in to tour the house. If there was a fibers department class that was coming in, she would talk about the beautiful quilts and reverse appliques that were on view. If it was a research group that was interested in collecting and the kind of attitude of all kinds of levels of ephemera being beautiful, she would talk about how Roger accumulated his really eclectic treasures. And I think it's really important to tailor a conversation to your audience, especially because the audience can always tell if it's one size fits all. But also, this is a two-way fitting. The presentation should fit how you want to discuss and how you want to engage with your audience. What story do you want to share? What are the stumbling blocks and stepping stones? Consider this an opportunity to reflect. I don't use the word story to imply that you should be artificial. Humans make sense of time through narrative because we experience a linear timeline. Joseph Campbell, a educator and mythology scholar, called artists the myth makers of our time. And it's a powerful device to use. We likely all know stories of artists that seem larger than life, and stories hold power. Your stories likely mirror those that you engage with, and this is an opportunity to build connection. Take the opportunity to reflect on your own life. What through lines do you see in your practice now? There likely are some. For me, as a child, my parents were very distant and my siblings were much older, and I spent a lot of time alone going through the attic, looking at their things. I was investigating. I was trying to understand them. I'm still interested in the way that we engage with objects and what they can tell us about their owners and history. And yeah, so I think that there are a lot of times when that, follows through. All right, question 5. What format works for you? PowerPoint video, question and answer. Consider being creative with your format. Not all talks have to be PowerPoints like this. Obviously, I had a lot of text that I was interested in sharing with you and kind of giving you the time to openly consider what works for you. But in my time at Northeastern Illinois University and Northern's Art Museum, I've seen people take a variety of approaches. You could ask a colleague or curator to interview you, and that makes an overall more comfortable atmosphere. It's more conversational. People tend to feel more comfortable not being the only one on the stage. You could do a gallery walkthrough where you talk about the narratives that are happening between work organically. Consider other activities that might be better for you. Are you a performance or video artist? What mediums would better communicate your perspective? I think that it's definitely worth questioning because it's something that we can be playful about. What influences would you share? Books, art, culture, common and niche. This is an artist world building. Being genuine about your influences is very important. Those close to you know if you're being artificial about it. And I think that the connections that are not, I think it's important to have connections that aren't outright obvious, right? If you consider all of the things that make you a person, it's worth finding, what kind of speaks to you. And Jerry Saltz said about artists that they have a personal pantheon, that you have all of those voices that are there for you that you can connect with at any time. So think about who spurs you on, whose work do you feel like you're in conversation with? Who would you like to be in conversation with? All right, question 7. We're moving along. What context do you see your work in reference to the past, to peers, and the future? What part of the conversation does your work live in? I feel like this is the most heady question for sure. It requires a lot of consideration and research, but you get to be the first one to draw the comparison and to kind of point to these connections. You get to pin the red yarn, as it were, from others to your practice. Where do you see it going? And how can you give credit where it's due? All right. Question 8. How can you be generous discussing your practice? What topics do you want to lean into? Details draw others in. The most terrifying part of sharing your work is the expectation of vulnerability. Without vulnerability, discussing your work is always going to be dry and boring. And vulnerability is bravery. Being generous about how you make your work, process pictures, research rabbit holes, won't make your audience think less of you. They'll be more invested. So I think that it's important to think about what you're interested in sharing more about. What thing did you mention to a colleague that you thought they wouldn't care about, and then they actually do? Those can be really, really interesting moments. And now the other side of that kind of situation, what boundaries do you want to set in interactions? What are your hard and soft stops, and how can you keep conversations productive? So this is a situation that I think that the art world hasn't really fully acknowledged the need for yet. And I think that we need to foster a generation of artists that are not combative, but questioning of authority and know when power dynamics aren't being fair. So I think that it's important to know what you will and won't talk about yourself and your work, and find language around setting boundaries with your practice and how you talk about it, and who gets into closer things. You know, it can take some time, especially with the art world, because we're kind of all expected to be an open book and vulnerable and open to criticism. But if people are weaponizing their aesthetic in a way that's not productive or abusing power, I think that that is part of the conversation that definitely has to be acknowledged and considered. All right, now this is the last question. Sorry to just throw you so many questions back to back. What connections might you draw? Discussing your practice often opens up the process. You learn more about yourself as an artist and a person. Take note of where you felt connected and where you felt disconnect. Every time I do an artist talk, I learn more about my practice, often from questions that others ask. It's an enriching moment, and it can be full of discovery. You're performing, but you're also taking in information. Maybe less with Zoom, but I think that often you're in a situation where you're reading the room, you're getting feedback. It's worth taking note of when you felt connected and when you didn't, what things worked and what didn't. It's all a practice, and it will grow. All right, so some tips for the process. These are kind of general things that I would say could just be added to your practice that'll be helpful for when you get to a place where you're doing a presentation to make it less scary. So they're kind of things that just like kind of need to get enveloped into your life in a way. And some of them might work for you and some might not. But reading about things that you're interested in and taking note of them and quoting them, I think is really helpful. even if you don't think that something you're reading is affecting the work you're doing, I'd encourage you to look back on something that you were making at a time when you were reading a specific thing and draw connections. I've constantly been astounded at the connection with the information I was taking in and the art that I was producing. Write down your thoughts about the work. Try writing a few pages every morning. This is directly an Artist Way recommendation. I write like morning pages as many mornings as I can. I'm not perfect, so I don't do it all the time. But it can be really helpful in getting out how you're thinking about things. They're not meant to be art, they're just meant to be process. And look back over images and think about what you've been doing. What might you want to share about your process in the future? You might find connections that you didn't notice, even just like a picture that you took on your walk that influences something that you make later. I personally, when I'm considering getting ready for a conversation with someone that I am just meeting, or a studio visit that I know I'm going to have to like discuss a lot of work in, or talk, these are some things that I do. I like to imagine the conversation that I want to have and think about how to facilitate that. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I mean it. I don't like, I'm not talking about like saying that I want this conversation to go in a way where it benefits me. I think that it's way more productive if you're considering what you want to be open for and receive from the other person. Consider that that moment might draw a lot of connection for you that's genuine, that's interesting, that's really enriching. For artist talks, I usually make a timeline. I think about the timeline of my life and what I've been doing and what I might draw conclusions between. I think that like storytelling is going to be really, really helpful for anybody that wants to make an artist talk that's really dynamic. And I write questions that I want to ask in studio visits. And it could be specific to someone's experience too. If, I do this like often with painters because I'm not a painter. I work much more in textiles, but I'm really interested in like the fabricness of what they paint on, like be it canvas or linen, and kind of like discussing like that objectness with them is something that's like kind of specific to that interaction. So you could consider that maybe there's a specific place that you like want to draw in from their experience. And be generous with yourself. Give yourself time and space. You really can't rush these things. And with the amount of like reflection that you're really kind of looking to do for making something meaningful, I think it just takes time. If you'd like to see some of my recent work, some of which is in progress behind me, actually, and talk to me about it, you can join us for the reception of For Those Who Toil at Purple Window Gallery on February 3rd. That's at the Manna Contemporary Building on the 8th floor, room 845, and it's in Pilsen. So if you're anybody that can make it to the South Side, please join us. And just to give you a little taste of like what it's about in this show, we're addressing post-industrialization and its lasting impact on the environment and the working class. I'm working with themes around this that are specific to the textile industry, while my partner is looking at the history of steel manufacturing in Chicago. So we're very excited about it and have been working on it for some time. And thank you so much. I left some of my information here if you'd like to see what on earth I make and connect. So my website and Instagram and email. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and go back to here.
Thank you so much, Millicent. I really appreciate it. I know as an artist myself and curator and all the playing cards that we have, it takes a lot of years to get to those questions. And I think ruminating on how to go about it and involving is extremely important, not only as a professional, but also as an artist. It's very much of a journey. So I would like to also open up to Q&As. So this can also be questions that we're going to allow you to unmute yourselves. If you could just use the little reactions on the bottom, wonderful Zoom hand, or you can come on, or also if you're a little shy, you can also chat. I will also moderate that to Millicent. But thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Can I talk?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have questions right now, but that was really interesting, and I hate that word interesting, but you know what I mean. I was engaged and I wanted to know more. You gave us a lot of information in a very short amount of time. Like, I feel like you could do a presentation on each one of these questions. And I would like that. I would appreciate that, but I'm sure you don't have time to do that. That's all I want to say for right now. I will come back. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I know it is a lot of questions, and I'm like happy to make that like group of questions just like available. I think that they're pretty tough. And overall, like it's a lot.
Okay, I have more. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So when did you start figuring out that this is how, when did you start figuring this all out? I'm sure it didn't happen like immediately, but like how long did this take? And how did you distill all of this? Did this happen through artist talks? Did it happen through the jobs you were working?
I think some combination. Like I would say that I'm still figuring out what makes sense, and like that's why at the beginning I really wanted to say like some of these questions might not make sense for everybody. Like I don't necessarily think that it's like a one size fits all approach. But yeah, I think that like the combination of practicing doing artist talks, and working with other artists, seeing what they're comfortable with talking about, and maybe I think too being on both sides of like the artist and like curator organizer spectrum has kind of opened up to me how complicated of a question it is. I feel like as an artist, you can come into an artist talk and feel like, you're the content creator and you're not really getting support for what you need. And there's like all of these expectations and they think it's like just easy because, the art, whatever. But like genuinely connecting is really kind of exhausting when it's like a group of people you've never met, or even worse, like I think the hardest artist talk I ever had was like a room of people I knew super well. And I like was so surprised that there were so many people that I knew. I was like, oh, they're going to know I'm a fraud. They're just going to like think I'm full of shit. So sorry, but I think that kind of seeing both sides of it's really been helpful in like kind of thinking about these things, and I kind of love doing artist talks a lot. I really enjoy it.
I have a question. Do you have a routine to get in the mood to talk about your work? Because I think sometimes like just with general social anxiety, I can like think about what I'm going to say and like have it all planned out, but then know that somebody's just going to ask a question that's going to like throw me off.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering if you have like a routine for like how to get yourself in the mood to talk about your work?
I think that I have to think about myself as an authority, you know, like I like imagine myself as a speaker that I've heard some other time, and how confident and safe they felt in like what they're doing. So maybe there's like a little bit of like projecting in it. But I also think just like doing things to take care of yourself leading up to it, and maybe having like a plan for something like aftercare afterwards. You know, planning to like have a nice meal or do something fun right afterwards. So even if you like don't immediately feel great about the talk in itself, like there's still something great that's going to happen next.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
There's also a comment in the chat. Thanks, Millicent. I agree that there's so much that comes to us when doing an artist talk. The questions people ask or things they say, it's very beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I remember like a more recent talk that I did at Wabansi. Someone asked it like, because I quilt a lot of broken things into fabric and then show them as wall works. And someone asked if I think of the like objects themselves as an artwork. And it was such a great question because I love ready-mades and found objects, and I'm very interested in that. But, you know, I think it was like one of the first times that I realized like how much these things are collaborators. And, you know, like having like language around that, like wouldn't have necessarily happened unless someone asked this specific question.
So Millicent, you had mentioned in regards to when you get ready for an artist talk, I'm just curious on the elephant in the room, imposter syndrome. How have you had that happen to you right before an artist talk, even though you've done it so eloquently so many times, as seen you as a colleague and a friend? How do you deal with that?
Well, I think we all have imposter syndrome, right? Like, and it's really not fair. And, you know, another way that like you can think about it, that can help for me at least is, you know, bigger dummies than you have done stuff like this. Like people that are like less qualified than you have done whatever. And so I just like try and take those moments and use that. I mean, if you need to like print out your like CV and your transcript, and you have like a whole list of things that make you qualified as an expert in your own work right there.
I definitely think that is the best advice to give people regarding, it doesn't matter if you've been doing your career for 6 years or 5 years. I think it all hits us, like you said, and it's also nice to hear that everyone kind of deals with it in a different way. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. And yeah, you said Maya Angelou had imposter syndrome and wrote about it, you know, it's, yeah.
I love the quote that you shared, because there's a really similar Michelle Obama quote where she talks about how she felt imposter syndrome constantly, and then she had walked into a room with a ton of people that were supposed to be super intelligent and like some of the smartest men in the world, and then she realized she was the only woman in the room, and especially the only like Black woman in the room, and was like, some of them aren't saying that smart of things, so why shouldn't I be an authority figure?
Yeah, absolutely. My cat's here, so I just wanted to share.
Can you show us your cat again?
What was that?
Can we see your cat again?
My cat?
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's Donut.
Oh my God, Donut. Hi. Thank you for being here.
It's very supportive.
I do have a question. I'm just going through like the notes that I did. And under the question 3, who is your audience? I wrote down avoid generic platitudes. What did you mean when you said that?
Yeah, so I mean, platitudes in general just means like a cliche. And I think that you know, it can be like safe and really kind of tempting to like go to things that like are kind of undeniable, right? Like, oh, I make art about what's around me. Or, you know, I wanted to be an artist since I was a kid. Like you can kind of like be in that safe space, and like that's not really like a thing that people can question, but I don't know if it like really gets to like the depth of what you might want to say. And so I think that that's what I was just kind of thinking about in general. And I don't know if anyone's ever been in an artist talk where someone like takes you through their website and just kind of like goes like project by project, like through their website. I kind of respect it because you have to have a really organized website to like do that well. But you can tell that like that's like a one size fits all thing. And you know, that might not be the conversation that they're interested in or that you want to be part of. So, you know, I think that that kind of is like a disservice on both sides personally. I try and change my artist talk like a little bit every time that I do it. You know, partly because like there's new things happening and, you know, like that's what you probably want to focus on. But also just like, as it goes from like a situation to a situation for you and like for based on like who is there, it could be just like, you know, helpful to shift. Yeah.
I wanted to
You're muted.
oh I wanted to mention something and relay it back to you. You talked about these morning journals or these morning notes that you you know, not always, but could you talk a little bit more about that? Like, how has that been beneficial to your artistic practice, or like, what is your strategy? Do you just have a prompt, or is it just kind of
Yeah.
whatever you're feeling?
Yeah, thank you for that. So morning pages are kind of part of Julia Cameron's prescription for artists. And it's 3 pages of free form writing that you do every morning, and it's about anything. And you have to do them within 45 minutes of waking up, because it's just like the foggy morning brain and getting out all of the things that are in you. And you know, the more you think like, oh well, I'm fine, I'm okay, like the more you like write these things that you think of first thing in the morning, you might realize like maybe these things aren't okay, maybe these are things that I need to like think about, or you know, whatever. And it can be pretty flexible. And I would say that mine generally kind of like start with the monsters that I might be dealing with in the morning and in the night, personally, and then, you know, kind of shift to like, what do I want to do with that? And then, you know, like what's happening today, how might these relate? And it really is pretty flexible, but you definitely could like give yourself prompts. I think that would be a great idea. For me, they're really free flowing. And yeah, you know, The Artist Way is a great book. Julia Cameron's like a really, really thoughtful educator. And the morning pages are just like kind of one part of her creativity practice that she recommends for artists. Another like really important part of it is the artist's date. And so that's like a scheduled time that you have every week where you do something by yourself that's for fun. And you can think of your like inner child as an artist that like, or your inner artist as a child that needs to like do something fun, right? It's not supposed to be educational. It's just supposed to bring you joy. And that those are like these moments that can like really enrich you and like bring things into your life. So I really recommend it. It's really hard to schedule in, but it's totally worth it.
So Millicent, I do have a question. I don't see any other questions at the moment, but while people are ruminating and on your responses, how do you go about time and all of the moving parts in regards to being an artist, being a curator, having multiple jobs and
Yeah.
teaching? So could you maybe enlighten us a little bit on the secret?
Oh God, I don't know. But I mean, for me, I have to just like keep a really tight schedule and you know, I even like keep a planner that separately has like projects in it to like estimate how much time I need for things. One of the things that I'm really trying to do for myself like this year is prioritize taking care of my health. And if that means things have to go slower, then they have to go slower. And that's just something that has to get built in to the time. And, you know, I think that we've all been part of like hustle culture, and it's making us sick. And we need to like find ways to balance it out. I mean, and like some parts of my practice, like I'm lucky in that parts of doing like the repetitive things feel good to me and reduce my anxiety and like bring me enough joy that it's not like daunting. But there are other things where it's just like I just have to schedule it in and like find the right time that's not going to be too hard. And I always have my like dad's voice in my head, where he says that the best time to do something you don't want to do is right now. So if it's like a task that takes 5 minutes and you just really don't want to do it, like it's probably just the best to go ahead and do it. Yeah, I don't know. I think that that's like the hardest thing. And you know, like I'm lucky to have a schedule where like weeks when I'm installing at the gallery and I'm really slammed there, like maybe there's something else that can go on the back burner for a little while. Or, you know, if I need to like get ready for this show, like there's other things that are set up to help. And I think that it is kind of just like a fluctuation and finding a flow. Yeah, I think it's different for everybody though.
No, thank you. I think that helps hearing your process because everyone has different different goals and they're in different
Mhm.
parts. It's different from being an MFA student. Now you're
Yeah.
a professional that's also an instructor. So it's definitely different levels of how to get through these without a guidebook, so to speak, or
Right.
how to take care of your mental health, which I think is important. I think a lot of us are thinking about labor and capitalism and how do we not only as artists, but also, and some of us instructors or curators or all three in your case, right? How do we make sure that we not only take care of ourselves and not spread ourselves so thin that it
Yeah.
becomes unmanageable? And I think that's a wonderful way to put it, is like maintaining your health. I think that's a great way to just start overall, is taking care of yourself in general, you know, no matter who or what you do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild. Like when you just like try and start with that as a baseline, it's like it's hard. It's like if I'm gonna like wake up and do my morning pages and do my yoga and shower and make myself a nice breakfast, it's like I need to have at least 2 hours of time before I have to get in like the car or go on the train. You know, yeah, it's really hard.
I have more questions. So I'm gonna ask an easy one. It's easier than the other question I have.
All right. Well, I think that this was quite an amazing
Oh.
workshop.
Oh,
Oh,
are
do
we
have-
done?
sorry. No, no,
I'm
no.
sorry.
I mean, we're definitely open for questions for
I'm
anybody.
sorry.
No, go for it.
No, like, okay, I'm gonna ask my harder question then. I don't want to tie anybody up. Who is your audience? Who do you think your audience is? How did you find them? I'm not trying to make this a multi-part question. It's just like generally, who is your audience? And yeah, how did you find them? I guess it's a two-part question.
Yeah, I think that I'm still discovering that, to be honest, but I think that my like audience has usually been people that are interested in material culture or interested in kind of like textile work that's slow and takes its time. And that can vary, but they tend to be like femme, non-binary people in general, is what I've noticed. And I think that like I have had some luck with like multi-generational like engagement with my work. Like I've had a lot of really great experiences with older artists, where I've been working with them like in community centers as an instructor, or like we've worked alongside each other, and I really love their perspective and their like kind of interest in what if I was more jaded, I would probably think that they wouldn't be interested in. I think that like the way that I found my audience has been a little ragtag and a little bit from everywhere, and being open to thinking that people are interested, and just hearing what they have to say about it, because not everybody will be, and that's okay too. It would be weird if they were, and just like having some space for people to like bring their own energy to something, I think has been helpful in finding the people that are interested in it. So I don't fully know like who my audience is. I feel like it changes. And yeah.
So having space to allow them to bring their own energy. Okay, I really like that.
I know, I'm sorry that
Yeah.
it feels very open to me, like that's like, but that feels like what's been there for me. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions that we may be percolating?
Yeah.
It's me again.
Yeah.
Sorry. This is the last one, I promise. Okay. So what format do you default to when you are giving an artist talk? And what format do you love to do? And I want to know why for both, like the pros and cons of both. And if you need me to repeat that, I can or type it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that if my work is there, then I don't need to do a PowerPoint, right? Like it's not necessary, if you're like seeing the work. So for me, I really like to do something that is like a combination of things. So like an interview, I think is probably my favorite. So I've done that before, like even just with my partner, like here's the questions that you're going to ask me, here's like loosely how I'm going to respond, but we're going to have like some open room for interpretation and play. I think that that's like what's felt the most like organic for me in the past, and lately I've been enjoying like having some other activation. So like in a show back in August, I did a performance that was like interactive with people. They could come in and bring an object that I would like record the shadow of it as if I was like accessioning it into a museum. And we would talk about like what that object means to them. And, it doesn't have to mean anything. Like it can be just that it's nothing, but sometimes like people have really amazing responses, and like, One person that didn't think that he brought anything had like his light that goes onto his bike. And just like, tell me how you feel about like having this thing. He's like, well, I know how I feel when I don't have it, and I feel naked when I don't have it on my bike. And it was just like, wow, that's a like real, meaningful feeling, like with this like little object, and like we're having this like, interesting moment where you're being vulnerable with me, and it's all because of this weird performance thing that I asked you to do and you agreed. And so moments like that can be like real genuine ways to like get people's feelings to the forefront, so they're like, kind of available to like be there. So that's been something that I've been interested in the recent past. So yeah, some kind of like performance, and then if the work's there, I would rather do like an interview instead of like showing slides. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's pretty flexible. I've had a great time just doing like gallery talks about the work, and kind of interacting with the space and reading the room. And I think that it really varies.
So has your work, have you always been doing artist talks as an invitational, or have you had the opportunity to apply to do an artist talk? Have you ever had that situation come up?
That's such a good question. I think that I've never like applied for one, but here's the thing, that it's actually like maybe the best reason for you to do an artist talk is, even if a place like gives you a show, they might not pay you, but they pretty much will always pay you to do an artist talk. So because you're performing that labor, right? Like you are a resource, and you're like educating people. So, even if you're not getting paid for a show, you'll often get paid for an artist talk. So it's a really good reason to volunteer to do it. But I think that mostly I've done them by invitation, but it's more been in that kind of setup where it's like part of a show. Occasionally I've had a situation where I'm doing like a workshop, like showing like something about my practice, and then it'll just kind of be like peppered into that too. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. These are such good questions. I'm having so much fun.
All right. So if anybody else has a question, please feel free to interrupt me. I am been known to chat a little too much. So no, I really do appreciate your time and everyone's time tonight, because it is a Saturday evening, and I know that some people might have other plans, but I really thank every single one of y'all being here with Dispatch tonight. We're still a not-for-profit and trying to make sure that we give to the public, and we appreciate Millicent giving their time to everyone as well. So like, we will eventually drop in Millicent's Venmo. It is not expected of anybody participants tonight, but if you can give a little, that'd be appreciated as well. And I just, if anybody else has any questions, please let us know. We would love to take anybody's, no question is silly. So believe me, I asked a silly question, so.
Yeah, thank you so much. Like, this has been really, really great. And like everybody has it in themselves to talk about their work, and I'm sure that you all do amazing jobs. So thank you for listening to me like ramble about my experience, and I really appreciate you doing that.
No, thank you so much. And